Hello, 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 Melvin. I'm so excited to have you on the Remember to Live podcast today.
Corrine, I'm incredibly honored to be here. I'm so glad LinkedIn, out of all places, has connected us. And yeah, just really looking forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, it's amazing how many new friends I've made off of that platform in the
Mhm.
last couple of years. And when you get a chance to talk in person, it's like we feel like we already know each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, I don't know, the more I do social media, the more I realize the best part of social media is the real relationships that come out of it and
Yeah.
the friendships, and I think if you can take it from online to offline, it's just all the better.
Yeah. It's definitely not all bad. Some people think you can't build real relationships online, but you can.
Yeah. Yeah,
Definitely.
100%. And I think there's also something to I feel like like-minded people attract like-minded people, right? Like we have a, I think we have like a gentle sort of like accepting presence. And I feel like a lot of the people that we both follow and who engage with our stuff also
Yeah.
seem to have that as well. So,
I would agree. So, to get us started, I like to start the podcast with the same question. And that is for you, in your definition, what does it mean to live a life and to live one well?
mm, such a good question. Man, we're starting with the easy questions, huh? um, Gosh, my mind is going to so many places with this. So, one, I would say designing a life and a business that I would want to live in retirement, but being able to do that like before, way
Mm-hmm.
well before retirement. Particularly for me, we have a 5-year old at home, and she was 2 months premature. And that going through that whole NICU experience and everything, I think
Mm-hmm.
it really taught me I don't want just revenue to be the measure of success,
Yeah.
business wise. I wanted like time with my family to be another important indicator. So, um, yeah, so I would say it's some combo of those things, and then I think, my faith informs a lot of how I try to see the world, even the things that we contribute to, and so trying to look at things also through the lens of faith. And also, I identify as Christian. And so I think just remembering like all of these things, these quote unquote treasures we're building here on earth,
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, like, what does it matter? So I'm just trying to
Yeah.
be so mindful about that.
Yeah. And I appreciate you sharing this story. My daughter also was in NICU when she
Mm,
was born. So I definitely know how that can give you a whole different perspective on life
mm,
in just what's really important. One of the things that I love that you mentioned is this idea of retirement, right? So
mm,
we've grown up in a world where we've been told, work really, really, really hard for 40 or 50 years. And then one day in the future, you get to live this life. And you're realizing, like, no, I want to live that life now. So
mm,
how do I build that life now? Because I think we see that that's not necessarily what happens in real life, especially as our parents get older and we're seeing people retire as we age and get to this point where they think they're going to still have quality of life and health and be vibrant, but they've kind of given it all away by
mm.
putting work first for so many years and not taking care of themselves and not
Yeah,
having the joy that they could have been having.
right. Yeah, I think it's one of I think the biggest myths, one of capitalism, and then two, I think just of like Western society. I think one of the biggest blessings for me has been I was as being born in India and then spending a decent chunk of my childhood, like basically the summers, I would live in India with my grandparents,
Mm-hmm.
and then school year would be here in the U.S. And so I think just living in two cultures like that and seeing what was valued and prioritized, I think it just gave me a more holistic perspective. And then I think, like what you're saying, we are both in seasons where we have aging parents and all of these
Mm-hmm.
things, and you realize Like you're so grateful for their sacrifice, and yet you're like keenly aware this like proverbial, retire at 65. But I think that assumes somehow you have like great health, or like it's almost like a vacuum definition of it.
Yeah.
And I just don't know if that's the reality. Yeah. I think the final thing around that is also for me personally, like, have you come across that palliative care nurse Bronnie Ware and her work?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of what I do is based off of her book, The Five Regrets of
Nice.
the Dying. Yeah.
Nice. So, I mean, that book, right? That was so seminal for me because at the crux of it, people most regretted that the relationships that they missed out on,
Yeah.
and then the risks that they didn't take,
Yeah.
right? And I've just come to realize, like, my partner and I, we're not like, we don't have like an extravagant lifestyle. We're pretty like, what really matters to us is like focusing on experiences and focusing on time with loved ones. And I just realized, like, I think it's possible to build that now, versus
Yeah.
waiting until later.
Yeah. I think watching my mom be in her end of life regrets,
Mm,
right? Like watching her get to the point where her mind and body just no longer can do what it used to do. So there's things that were on the list that she's just never going to be able to do.
mm,
And that makes you realize like how many of us end up with this big pile of regrets because we put everything else first, especially when you look at how simple those five regrets are.
mm,
Like they're very simple if you're intentional about it in life.
yeah.
And I think that that's important. And one of the things that I appreciate you bringing up too is like you're choosing your lifestyle. You're
Hmm.
choosing how you want to live. You're not buying into the fact that you have to, grow your business and become a multimillionaire and have all the material things and live like this cookie cutter ideal of success we've
Hmm.
been taught, but defining your own success because I know you've had a practice and started a business and you're getting to a point where you realize like exactly how you want to design your life.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think it's the wisdom of think of aging, and, again, going through that whole NICU experience. I think that that centers you in a new and different way. When, I mean, there was I don't really usually share this online, but Corinne, there was like a moment where my partner was in, like, they said you basically have to do emergency C-section.
Mm-hmm.
And so and they would not let me into that room because they just thought like it was just too risky. So I'm sitting in this like cold hallway and I can hear like the surgical team on the other side of this door. And, there's a moment where I thought I had lost both my wife and my
Mm-hmm.
child,
Yeah.
because like we didn't hear, or I didn't hear the crying, like the baby's crying for like
Mm-hmm.
several seconds, and turned out the anesthesia they had given my partner like went into the baby for a little bit, and then she was
Mm-hmm.
kind of like, had to get
Yeah.
like alerted back. And so I don't know. I think when you go through these experiences, it really makes you wonder and think about like, what am I building? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and why am I building it? And I think the bigger thing for me, at least, I don't think I thought this in my 30s, but now I think about it more in my 40s, is like, at what pace do I want to build things?
Mm-hmm.
Which is very different than I think mainstream social media. And it's not that I don't feel that pressure, because I definitely do,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
um, it's like, I don't know. It's like I want to enjoy the journey, but I don't have to like build it in a way that takes time away from my family, or, for an extended time, right?
Yeah.
Or is like not kind to my like nervous system, you know?
That part.
Yeah.
That part. Having suffered full burnout and ended up in the hospital and body shut down, pace is important.
Hmm.
And if you're just constantly on the go and you're never making time for rest or to slow down or to recharge, like your body takes a toll. And I think a lot of us feel it I call it the whispers and the roars. Like we'll start to feel the whispers, but we just keep going because we have that constant, like when I hit this milestone, then I'll get rest, then I'll slow down. And then one day your body has to roar and it
Mm,
stops and you're forced to slow down. And I prefer not to be forced anymore to listen to my body and like take the time in living. And that's
mm,
partly why I call this podcast Remember to Live, is because we are so busy doing all these things for an outcome in the future that we forget to live
mm.
in the moment
Yeah.
while it's happening.
Yeah. Absolutely. Um, I think for me, and this has probably been one of the hardest pieces of this, is when I hear the whisper, not trying to bypass it with just work harder, like don't be
Mm,
lazy, you
mm-hmm.
know, because that's usually the counter. There's actually a
Right.
weird roar that comes in that whisper,
Yes.
right? And just realizing, I don't know, I'm a big basketball like person, and I've just been like looking at, both the WNBA and the NBA, and like they have in season and they have off season, right?
Right.
There's a
Yeah.
reason why athletes do this. And why can we not apply that same principle to business as well? Because it just seems like a more sustainable model. But it's hard because that's not the mainstream advice, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, we're both active on LinkedIn, and I know I feel it. It's like a lot of the mainstream advice is post like 7 times a week, 2 times a
Mm-hmm.
day on LinkedIn, and you're guaranteed growth. Probably true, but at what cost, you know?
Right. And then there's that pressure or fear of like, oh, I can't take a break because then I'll fall behind
Yeah.
or I'll miss out. But a metaphor I use a lot with my clients too is like we can't run a marathon every day.
Mm,
Nobody can handle running a marathon every day. Yet we try,
yeah.
both mentally and physically, even though we're not running, we're not allowing ourselves real rest.
Yeah. Right.
I love that. I love the idea of off season. So in there's two things you made me think of.
Mm,
One is the counter kind of feeling because I remember the first week I no longer had my corporate role when after I left my last corporate role. And then during my entire corporate career, I never actually took a break in
mm,
between roles. It's I might have had a week or two, but like I already had access to the new stuff. So it's like, oh, let me just dive in and get ahead. And
mm,
like you always had it on your phone, right? And well,
mm,
at the point of my career when we had cell phones, because when I started, that wasn't as much of a thing as now for work. But I remember that first week, the first couple of days, it was like, oh yeah, I can. Oh, I'm gonna take a break. And then, like literally by like the third or fourth day, I started getting this feeling like, oh, like you said, oh, I'm just being lazy. I need to do something. And I found myself starting to create busy things to do to feel
mm,
the pressure
mm,
because it wasn't, I didn't have the IMs, I didn't have the emails, I didn't have something that I constantly was calling me. And so I started just make up things. And
mm.
then I caught myself like, oh, I've built the habit of feeling the pressure in my body.
Yeah.
And because that became my baseline for so long,
Yeah.
like I'm unconsciously
Yeah.
trying to create it.
Can I ask you a question? Because
Of
I have
course.
a theory on this.
Yeah.
So I do feel like people generally struggle with this. I do think like women and BIPOC folks particularly struggle with this, given like trauma
Mm-hmm.
around it. So like, I can just share for myself, like child of immigrants. My parents immigrated from India. I was born in India. And I felt like, and I remember my parents often saying, like, we're moving to the US to give like better educational opportunities for you and your brother. And I feel like, and I don't think they ever explicitly said it, but what I felt often is I can't rest.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just got to keep pushing,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know. I would love to like hear how you think about it.
Yeah, I think it's twofold. It's my father died very when I was very young, and watching my mother constantly worry about money or what was going to happen or needing someone to take care of her or just kind of feeling her pressure. And
mm,
then I became a mother at a very young age. I had my daughter my senior year of high school.
mm,
And so I always had someone else to take care of. And so all through college and building my career, I was a single mom. My son came along in college and there was no one else to do it. Like
mm,
outside of my father who had passed, I was the only one in my family who went to college. I was the only one who, like, most of my family didn't even graduate from high school. So there
mm,
was this pressure of I have to. I even had a leader once who we were just kind of sitting and chatting and getting to know each other. She's probably one of my favorite leaders that I've ever had. But we had a very open and honest conversation, and she asked if she could ask me a question too.
mm,
And she said, as I learn your personal story, and she's a white woman, and she said, as I learn your personal story, in so many ways, society would think you would have become a statistic. These things that we hear about that happens when you grow up in the environment you grew up in, or you have babies earlier, and all these things. And she's like, but you haven't, and you've done so much. And she's like, what was the reason for it? And when she said that, I was like, I didn't feel like I had a choice. Like,
mm,
to me, there was no other choice than to just go and do and keep going and working and building a life for my kids. And so something in me, like you said, you just got to go. You got to work.
yeah.
I've always had two or three jobs up until, or a side hustle or something, because I never felt like I could just have one thing and
Mm,
then go rest because there was more I needed to do or
yeah.
achieve, not even for me, but for the people I was responsible for.
Mm. Yeah. It's, thank you for sharing that. I mean, it's something I struggle a lot with. And especially I think, we're talking about like LinkedIn as an example, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that sort of pull of like, here's how to grow. You see people growing by
Mm-hmm.
posting more frequently, and it really triggers that part of me that is used
Mm-hmm.
to going 150, thinking like that's normal. It's hard. Um,
Yeah. One of the things when it comes to like content creation and building
mm,
a business is I had to stop listening to people from a business perspective, right? So
mm,
I've spent 20 years in media marketing, advertising. Like, I know how to do it. Like, I have the formula. I've done it for the biggest brands in the world. And when I started applying that to myself and what I wanted to build, it felt so much like work and not like fun. But I'm a
mm,
very creative person. Like, my whole childhood, I thought I was going to go to art school. I thought I was going to do all these things, but then I became a mom. And I said, oh, well, now I can't do that because society's telling me to be a successful mother and a responsible mom. You have to go to this type of school and get this type of degree and have this type of job and do all of these things. But I love to create when it's just coming from a place of me and my creativity and not
mm,
checking boxes that someone else gave me. And so when I'm in the mood and I'm flowing and there are days when I post every day, but it's because I was inspired by something and I wanted to create. And I'm doing it not because of the numbers and not checking the analytics all day long and seeing the likes. I feel like I have something to say. And I spent a
mm,
lot of my life probably not using my voice in the way that I should.
mm,
And when I look around at what's happening in the world and in our lives, and it's like, oh, this is why I do it. Because if there's one person today that hears this message and something shifts in their life and they get back to more of the living, then that's really why I do it.
mm.
But it's hard, right? Because you see the numbers and the tickers and people talking about it and
Yeah.
all the success they're having. And you're like, well, I want that too,
Yeah.
you know?
Right. Yeah. There's definitely a fine balance. I like what you said about that because I think recently, like, I mean, this summer, at least for the last month and a half, I'd really pulled back on LinkedIn, and just to kind of pace, and we were away and all of that
Mm-hmm.
kind of stuff. But then recently, I was like, you know what? I think we've got a pretty good flow with like content where it's almost like we have a flywheel going, and
Mm-hmm.
let me just experiment with posting Monday through Friday. Because we
Yeah.
were And I was like, even until 2 weeks ago, we would post our podcast episodes on Saturdays. And then I was like, you know what? Like I can never actually be there. It's getting auto posted. I'm like trying
Yeah.
to like, get our kiddo dressed for something or something's happening on Saturday mornings. I was like, you know what? Like, what would it be just to post on weekends, and just kind of focus on what we're doing. And then, yeah. But thank you for saying that because I think there's a part of me I'm like, am I like overstretching myself? It doesn't feel like it right now, but
Yeah.
so
And when I feel like I really need to take a break, I take a break.
yeah. And I think
And
that's the biggest
yeah,
thing, right?
yeah,
I think that's the one thing I've realized is the ultimate one of the ultimate like wisdoms of like business growth is learning to trust your intuition, right? And saying like you said, the whisper, like saying,
hmm,
"Oh, here's whisper. Okay, I'm gonna
yeah,
dial that down because I know if I just keep letting it exist, I know where this is gonna end up 2 months from now."
yeah. I'm curious how the fact that you grew up experiencing these two different cultures, and so I've never been to India,
Mm.
um, but I do have friends who've shared their childhood experiences, and I know it's just like anywhere else. It's different if you grow up in a city or you grow up in a rural place or a
Mhm.
slower place. I'm curious to know kind of what did what did the two different cultures teach you, and how does that kind of help you now that you're designing your life to
Yeah.
show up fully and have this experience with your family? Like, what are you pulling from each of the cultures that you feel is beneficial, and what do you feel like is probably the thing you should let go of?
Mm. Uh, I can start with the let go of because I knew that one immediately. That my identity is on achievement, on
Mm,
like that's I think the biggest one. I mean, there's that sort of like myth, right? And it is a myth, like the particularly among South Asians, right? Like there's the model minority, right? So
mm-hmm,
myth, which is, if you're Indian, that means you're a doctor, lawyer, engineer,
mm-hmm,
and then you live in a really nice house that, whatever, right? But I'm seeing so many of my friends in their 40s, like having health issues, burnt out, marriages breaking apart.
yeah,
And we're really just, I think, starting to realize the compromises that are being made to like achieve that level of achievement, and to sustain that.
yeah,
So that's like the number one, definitely the biggest thing um, of letting go. The thing I learned to appreciate what you have and not now what I think I needed to have,
mm,
for some reason I've never shared this story, but like for some reason when you asked that question, it came to mind. One of my trips to India. So usually we took like public transportation. So there's like they call them like private buses or like the state buses, right? And so
mm-hmm,
I think we were at like one of the in this city where it was like this in the state bus stand, right? And we walk out of the bus stand and there's people begging on the sides, right, of
mm,
the road, right? And one of the folks begging, he was making combs like uh out of something and just like sitting on a like I think it was just like a tarp from like an old like bag of rice, you
mm,
know? And that's where he was sitting and he was making these combs that he was selling. And I remember like being in middle school and thinking about contrast between the US and that
mm,
image,
mm-hmm,
right? At least where we were in the US. Um, and then I just remember like there was a there was like a joy of dignity to even what he was doing. Like he was not embarrassed by it. And so
yeah,
I think it's allowed me, I think, to see people and give people the benefit of the doubt, you know.
mm-hmm,
Um, yeah. And, and I think I really like, I talked nuance, like briefly about faith, but like, I really do believe that, like, for me, like, we're not the grace of God, like, that I get to live here. My parents chose to immigrate, that I get to be born in this season, right,
Mm-hmm.
of this time period. And, um, yeah, so I think it's just one of the things I think, just generally, I think going back to India is like seeing the disparity,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's even more pronounced there than here in the States between wealth and not having wealth. It makes you really appreciate the humanity in others.
Yeah. I think that's the thing I am most grateful for and appreciate the most about the fact that I've been able to travel to different places,
Mm,
and that during my travels, I don't always just like go to a resort, which they're nice, but like I love the trips where you go and you get to actually experience a different culture and be ingrained in it and see there's so many different ways that people live in the world.
mm,
There's so many different levels of having in the
mm,
world. But yet at each of those levels, you see people who experience joy.
mm. Yeah.
And at each of those levels, you see people who are miserable, right?
Mhm,
So I've seen people and I've worked with people who have wealth beyond anything they would ever need, yet there's no joy in their life.
mhm,
And I've seen people with nothing and wake up happy every day.
mm.
And that's what really makes me believe that we have a choice in our experience of life.
Yeah, I think that's so well said. I think one of my most fond memories of India was just how everything was built around like relationships.
Mm-hmm.
That uh, okay, we're gonna go visit here for like 4 o'clock chai, and it's not just like we're gonna just stop in and then hang out there for 10 minutes and leave. Like
Yeah.
it ends up into a deeper conversation. How are things? Like it's I don't know. I think it's just given me such an appreciation for how powerful and cleansing relationships are
Mm-hmm.
in our lives. And yeah, it's something I try to always now really be mindful of, particularly I think also I forgot the exact stat, but I read this like really like crazy stat about like how a very high proportion of men don't have a best friend.
Mm,
And I just thought, wow, like,
yeah.
oh my gosh, that's like heartbreaking.
Oh, I don't know what I would do without my best friends. I actually
Right.
have a lot of best friends, so I feel
Yeah.
super grateful. I have a
Yeah.
lot of lifelong best friends.
Yeah.
And when I see people who don't have that, it breaks my heart because it's like, I don't know how I would make it through a lot of things in life if I didn't have those people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I think it speaks to like socialization, conditioning, gender roles, like all
Yeah.
of that kind of stuff too, right? Like, um, yeah, we recently like, went back to visit family in Texas, and there was like a moment where I thought, like, could we see ourselves moving back to Texas? And I came to realize is like, man, like the relationships I have here are so deep and so strong
Mm,
and so real. Like it's really that would be the hardest thing to let go of.
yeah. Yeah. I remember reading research recently where it said that the quality of our relationships is such a key indicator to longevity
Mm,
and happiness in our lives.
mm.
And they even showed that. Did you watch that show that was on Netflix that was like Live to 100? It was where they went to all the different blue zones.
Oh yeah, yeah. I saw the previews for it. I didn't get a chance to watch it. Worth watching?
Yeah, what I loved about it is because we hear a lot about like the Mediterranean and like associate that, but they went to all different parts of the world,
Mm,
even like cities and different parts of the world and different countries. And then at the end, they break it down into like the top five things where all these people who live over 100, good quality of life over 100, because you can live a long
mhm,
time and have many, many years of poor quality of life.
mm,
and relationships. And like you said, like the tea in the afternoon and the social gathering and having a sense of community was such a huge part of that. And it just makes me think about how disconnected
Mm.
we are in so many ways, especially here in Western society, right? Like we are lucky enough to be present in our lives and have genuine connections and be able to find people online. But there's so much that's not genuine. And there's so many people who don't have real connections and never look up from their phones. And I know you, as being a therapist and helping people as they may be struggling with loneliness and not being connected, I feel like we're also in a world that fosters disconnection.
Yeah.
And that is why I think it's even more important to build community
Yeah.
in any way that we can.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's everything you said is like so beautifully said. I think it's one of the biggest conflicts I have, even with social media, right? Like, I'm like keenly aware that the number of followers I have does not equal the quality and depth of relationships, right?
Yeah.
And in fact, if I lean too hard, which is what all these social media platforms meant to do, right? These algorithms, right?
Mm-hmm.
Posts more, create this content, post more frequently, like whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is, right? But it creates these weird relationships where you think like somehow your self-worth is wrapped up in your 50,000 followers or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and but I think the way that we're thinking about it, I think it's a probably a healthier way, which is maybe it's not about the followers, maybe it's about the depth of connections. Who is it that we're resonating with, and how do we take those offline and build friendships and support each other?
Yeah. I recently I've been doing more just posting on other networks. I've been consistent on LinkedIn for a long time, but
Mm,
I've been having fun creating content and testing out the other platforms.
mm,
Part of my you know 20 years in advertising and marketing is like, let me test these things and see what's going on. But the one thing I realized that I genuinely get more excited about is not how many people looked at the video or checked the like or the heart or whatever. It's when I get a real comment or question that's
mm,
like turns into a conversation. It's like
mm.
when you make a real connection,
Yeah, yeah,
I think that the engagement is what I care about the most. Like real engagement, not fake engagement.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Right. I think
Yeah.
that's the magic of social media.
Yeah.
Um, it's hard though. Like, this is the one piece I struggle with, which is I try to be very thoughtful about how long I spend on social media. But then
Mm-hmm.
sometimes these relate, like those back and forths, they can go for a while, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. How do you balance that? Because I feel like sometimes I struggle with that piece of it.
Yeah. I can struggle too. I think we all can just go down the rabbit hole, right?
Yeah.
And just kind of get sucked in and stay there and look up and like, oh, an hour later, an hour later, I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
Um, but what I also recognize is I've really been focused on the fact like I want to actually move my body,
Mm,
and I start to feel it in my body and my eyes and my just like if I'm sitting there for a while, I realize like I haven't moved. So
mm,
that's been kind of like my hack is especially as I age and like you said in the 40s I'm learning a lot about myself, right? And one of the things is if we don't move, we're going to stop moving.
mm-hmm,
We're not going to be able to move anymore. And we spend a lot of time sitting. So I'll say, okay, if I want to keep scrolling, then let me get up and walk and do it. And then that's not really easy to do, right? So at
mm-hmm,
least you can kind of get yourself out of it.
mm,
But it's hard because it's designed. It's designed to grab our attention. It's designed to suck us in. So that's why I do a lot of mindfulness practices
mm,
and learn to be present in the moment and learn to check in with my nervous system and just see where I'm at. And like some days it's like, cool, I'm gonna sit here and scroll for an hour because that's what I feel like doing. And the content is fun and it makes me laugh and that's fine. But if it starts being like every day for multiple hours, then I'm like, okay, let me get back to like real life for a minute.
Yeah, I like that. Um, yeah, I'm a big proponent of being outside as well. I think one of the best recent things that I did, or last post pandemic, is I started breaking up my day into 2 mini days, and
Mm.
in the middle is like a 45-minute hike followed by a 25-minute power nap.
Oh, I love that.
And then even within the 2 days, like mornings tend to be like deep work, and then
Hmm.
afternoons tend to be like learning, writing, reflecting, kind
Yeah.
of. And I feel like that's been really, I like that pace. I don't know if it works for everybody, but like
Hmm.
I feel more grounded in it.
Yeah.
Um, you know. So.
Yeah. That's one of the things I work on with my coaching clients a lot
Mm,
is designing our days because in the big scheme of things, like that's the only place that life happens
mm-hmm.
is like your day. And so many people are spending their lives and they have the calendar, they're figuring out what to do, but it's based off some future thing happening, or tell me how to get this next title, or tell me how to get this raise, or what is somebody else doing? Oh, they're successful, let me design my day just like them.
Mm,
But really, when you push all that away and you think of like, well, what would my ideal day be, like my perfect day of living, knowing that we won't ever have it every day,
mm,
but like if we can allow ourselves to get really real about what that would be and start to use that as our North Star instead of a title or a job or a external validation point, it becomes a lot easier to make decisions in life, and knowing that we can change it because we go through seasons. And like, I think the first part of our day and the last part of our day are the most important parts of the day. I call it our
mm,
sacred brackets.
mm,
And I feel like when you first wake up, like fill your cup first because
mm,
we tend to want to give so much and do so much for others. As humans, we're genuinely want to give and are good, but we can't pour from an empty cup. And if we
mm,
don't make the time to do at least something to fill ourselves, to take care of ourselves first, so no matter what happens after that, we've taken care of ourselves,
mm,
and then building some sort of routine or ritual where you come back to yourself at the end of the day and release the day
mm.
and let it go because it's done and there's nothing you can do about it. So don't let it keep you from resting. I feel like those two things can make such a difference. And then I love how you've like looked at the middle of your day and designed it. I think that's a practice that can make a huge difference in your life, but it's such a small thing to just get intentional about how you shape your days.
Mm. Yeah, thanks for saying that. I mean, part of it was practical. Like everybody kept saying, drink coffee. And I was like, that hurts my stomach. Like I
Yeah.
can't, I think I just need a rest. Um, and, but it's been great. Like, and again, I realize there's like, not everyone has the luxury and all of that. And honestly, I've only been able to build this like many, many years in. But yeah, I think it feels more kind
Mm,
to the nervous system.
mm-hmm.
We were talking about that earlier. So, and it feels more sustainable, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And like, why did we ever start thinking naps were a bad thing?
Right. Oh, yeah. I know.
Like, we know them, we watch the wonders that it does for our kids. So
Hmm.
what makes us think that it's bad for us?
Yeah. I mean, that was one of the things in India. Like my grandfather, he would make my brother and I like take a nap every day, and he would take one too.
Oh, yeah.
And so, like, uh, I was like, oh, and you feel so much better,
Yeah.
right? Like, um, yeah.
I love that. Like if you're tired, rest. But we're so used to saying, "Oh, well, here, take this energy drink or this substance
Hmm.
or this something to just push through." So
Yeah.
I think there's a theme here of knowing when to give your body a little bit of rest.
Yeah. And there's like, yeah, there's messages around what it means, right? When we don't, or yeah, like if we choose to rest, right? Like resting is not laziness. Resting is often a lot of times about letting us pace and listening to our like, I think of it almost like our inner child, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So I have a few questions to just kind of, I think are a little bit fun. And so you've The first question I usually ask is, what's your favorite part of the day? I'm guessing it's the middle, but there might be a different part of the day that's your favorite part of the day.
Oh man, middle is probably right, but I do love like I get up early and I love like yeah, you talked about filling from a cup. Um, I usually do have no, I'm gonna say the middle. The
Yeah.
combo of the hike. On my hikes, you usually talk like catch up with a friend. So I kind of double dip on it.
Yes.
And then I will grab a quick shower, grab a power nap, and then wrap up a couple hours.
I love that. It's like a whole well-being fill your cup session in the middle of the day too, because we talked about how important relationships are, and we feel like we never have time to connect with people when we have really busy schedules or lives. I don't like to use the word busy. I actually like to say full,
Mm.
but busy is such a word that we throw out there all the time, right? Like I'm busy, busy, I'm too busy for that. So when you can find ways to combine things that you know you need to do for yourself, like move your body and focus on relationships, I think that's like a beautiful life hack.
Mm.
Thanks for sharing that.
Mm.
The other thing is, what's your current cozy? I love cozy things, and I feel like some parts of life should be cozy. So, what's your current favorite cozy?
My partner is gonna like be like, "Oh my gosh, you're totally gonna say this," but there's like Eight Sleep, right? Like the mattress thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? So there's another one called Bed Jet, which is like I think this was on Shark Tank a couple of years ago. So literally, I'm going to answer that literally. So we recently, because I've been like really thinking about like how do we all rest well,
Mm-hmm.
and so we have this like dual zone bed jet system where basically, um, like before I go to sleep, I this jet like basically shoots in hot air into underneath the sheets, so it's nice and cozy, and
Oh
then over
wow!
through the night I'll keep it at like 20% kind of cooling. So it keeps me kind of cool all night long. And I feel like the quality of my sleep is like so much better. I've had good sleep like traditionally, like
Mm-hmm.
recently, but like this is like next level. So it's literally using a bed jet as my cozy
Oh,
recently.
I've never heard of that. So it's like you get in and you get to feel the like cozy snuggly, but then you
Yeah.
also get the benefit of you sleep better when it's cooler.
Yeah. 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 Because I
Oh.
noticed like, because like especially my legs, like I was like overheating, especially in the summers,
Mm-hmm.
and that was impacting my rest quality of sleep. So, yeah, the bed jet is basically there's like a sheet that you connect the actual jet to, and then there's an app and a remote, and you can basically set it like I want it to cool or heat or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is. And then it just shoots either hot air or cold air. But it does it, I guess it pulls the air from the ground, like the ambient air, and pushes it through.
Ah.
So um, it hasn't worked great when it was like 100 degrees when we had the heat
Oh
wave,
yeah.
but every other time, like it's been
Yeah.
fantastic. So
Yeah. I mean, I feel like every summer's getting hotter and hotter
yeah, yeah,
as life goes on. So
yeah,
hopefully we do something about that
yes.
as a people. What is, or do you have a like go to feel good song?
Oh, I really like old school stuff. So the Temptations, like,
Oh yeah.
yeah, like I don't know. My partner, I different started running jokes. She's like Tupac, and I'm like the Temptations.
I love both. So
Yeah,
I love that. That's so fun. I mean, who? Well, there's probably people who don't love Tupac. I don't know who doesn't love Tupac, but
the lyrics are so good.
what is one thing you do right now for your 80-year-old self?
Mm. A slant board.
Oh, what is that?
So, I wish I could show you, but it's basically a board that looks like this, and I stand here, and it stretches your hamstrings and your Achilles and your like calf muscles.
Oh, I need to look that up.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
great purchase. Like a couple of my PT friends recommended it
Mm-hmm.
because they were like, you spend a lot of time in front of a computer,
Yeah.
and also because I hike every day, and I've had ACL repair, so I was like, let me just like stretch that out. Can I give you a second one too?
Yeah.
I in part of my night routine, I lay on this. Have you heard of this thing called like a bed of nails?
Is it like the where I see the little ads
Yeah,
and people have all these little spikes on it?
yeah, the
Yeah,
plastic one. So
yeah,
there's one that I use is called the Prana Mat Eco. So it's like, or what is that? Orotech, like the certified, like no toxins, is made of natural
yeah.
ingredients and stuff. But that thing is amazing too. I lay on that for like 5 to 7 minutes and do like a meditation or a mindfulness routine at the end of the day. I feel like particularly with my shoulders, it that just helps a ton, like release stress there.
Oh, I'm gonna have to check that out. I have a sauna blanket, like a higher dose sauna blanket that I
Oh,
use. But I have been looking at different mats and things. I love
yeah,
having things at home that help you kind of reset your
yeah,
nervous system, give
yep,
yourself your own kind of at home spa treatments whenever you
yeah,
want.
yeah, absolutely. I'm a big advocate of that as
Oh
well.
yeah, you'll have to send me the links to those so that way I can put them in the show notes if anybody wants to
Yeah, check it out. Yeah,
check them out.
I'll DM it to you.
Yeah. And so the last question I have is, how do you remember to live?
I mean, I look at our daughter every day and I remember that it's not just about me, like this is her generation, you know. One day she will become an adult. And so how do I both um live in the moment, being like what values am I showing to her? But also like how do I responsibly like steward life here, you know,
Mm,
the earth, the resources and all of that for her generation.
yeah. Yeah. We don't think about that as often as I think we probably should. Like what we're doing for the people who might not even be here yet.
Hmm.
What are we going to leave behind? Yeah. Oh, I love that. So, Melvin, tell everyone how they can find you, where they can reach you, how they could work with you, what you have going on right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Corrine, thank you again for this opportunity. I just like thoroughly enjoyed our conversation.
Yes.
I'm a podcaster, so you can find the podcast over at sellingthecouch.com/STC podcast. And I'm very active on LinkedIn. You can just look my name up, Melvin Varghese, and definitely would love to connect with you there. I'm a psychologist by profession, and so um, really have a passion for working with what I call like high achievers who are navigating are you know on the surface like very successful, but are also going through really hard seasons of life, particularly depression, anxiety, grief, and loss. I think those are the areas that I really have a lot of passion for.
Yeah. And it's definitely needed. Definitely. Thank you for the work you do. And thank you for being such a light in all the spaces that we interact in. And I was so happy that you were able to be on the podcast today and I can share you with my whole community. So definitely find Melvin, connect with him because he is such a joy to have in your life.
Corinne, thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Bye.